Hello everyone, my name's Chris Rogers. I'm running this session called Cashless. You're probably doing it wrong. So it's a bit of a tough one. This one's quite a broad topic. So what I thought we'd do was, I'm going to get everyone to introduce themselves because we've got quite a array of expertise on the panel from all different parts of the world. Some already dealing in cashless scenarios. So I'm going to get them to introduce themselves and give their sort of experience on cashless. So we'll start with Tracy, the good-looking one.
Thank you, Chris. My name is Tracy Winslow, and I'm with Transact Technologies. You might know Transact as the maker of the ticket printers that go inside slot machines and at table games. So I like to say that we are the OG of cashless gaming. Topic cashless is a very wide topic, as Chris said. So I'll be providing a little bit of point and counterpoint to the views on the panel, and thank you for having me here.
Thanks, Tracy. We'll start down the end there. John, you want to take it away?
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. I'm John Van Ward, work for IGT as the Director of Systems, Product and Sales for Asia Pacific. It was mentioned in the last panel, systems is being driven, purchase decisions are being driven heavily by cashless in a lot of markets around the world. Asia Pacific specifically. As you can hear from my accent, I'm based in Sydney, Australia, where a lot of activity is happening in cashless at the moment, being heavily driven by government. There will be points in time in Australia where cashless gaming will be mandated. Now, certainly, I think we'll discover over the course of this panel, we're not suggesting that should be the case everywhere, but that's what's happening in Australia, and we'll see how that flows through the rest of the region.
Thanks, mate. Nick, where you go?
Hello there. My name's Nick Hill. I've been involved in the online gambling space for 20 plus years, but recently I now represent a company called Enchain, and we're a blockchain development company, and we've got involved in the cashless casino environment because of the use of blockchain as a distributed ledger technology. It's not a coin, it is actually a utility application. That's how we use it. Now, cashless to me means the ability or giving land-based casinos the capability to provide a true sort of cashless environment which enables them to engage in a better way with their players and also be able to provide sustainable gameplay for their players and keeping their players in sort of entertainment zones, and they can engage with these younger demographic of players and protect their businesses in a true omni-channel form, and that's how I sort of see cashless playing out.
And thank you very much. I'm Paul Foster. I run a company called Crucial Compliance, and we are primarily actually a technology company that's worked very hard in the behavioral sciences. So what we've done is built systems around behavior. So behavior monitoring, behavior tracking, so that we can actually start to interact with players. So when it comes to cashless, for me, it's all about player protection. So can you create an environment in a land-based ecosystem that is as safe as an online area can be? And if you manage to do that, then what's the impact on the player? So can we minimize the impact on the player so they can still have the entertainment, but at the same time, just try and push them into that safety zone?
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. So for me, there's a couple of regions that lots of activity are happening around and towards cashless. One's the US. There's just lots of things happening in the US, lots of companies coming out with different payment gateways and just a lot of movement in the US, and obviously the other one's Australia. So maybe Tracy, can you give us your thoughts on what's happening in the US in and around cashless specifically?
Sure. As sports betting has become legalized in more states, I think we're getting more used to the idea of operating in a cashless environment in the casino as well. And so now sports betting's been legalized in 37 states, I believe, in the US. So people are getting more familiar with having an app that they use for sports betting. I think that it's causing a lot of growth in the area of investigating cashless in any case. We are seeing some systems roll out. There's been a lot of fits and starts with it, and I would say one of the major barriers that we've seen is just the ease of using the technology is not really been proven yet. There's been a lot of player reluctance to go fund their digital wallet. And so I think with the technology rollouts that we've seen, that's been kind of the major barrier. There's one system that does utilize, well, at least one system that utilizes the Tito ticket to fund, and that's been more well accepted, just from a familiarity standpoint, I think, from the player.
We spoke about that earlier, like today. So there's a crossover period, right, between what people, I think a lot of people perceive as pure cashless on a phone, on a device, where if you have, particularly the younger generation that just don't carry cash, they use their phone for everything, depending on what country you even live in to a certain extent, because certain countries have much, I certainly know living in Australia, there's other countries that have way better payment gateways than what we have, all driven through your mobile phone. In a place like the US, where you've got sports betting coming on, attracting a whole bunch of new potential customer base for a land-based casino, for instance, that might be people who don't play table games or slots coming in because they're experiencing the sports betting, or they're just getting into betting through sports. I think it's a formula that needs a little bit of thought in and around how we keep the existing customer base engaged, and also how you engage the future customer base, which everybody talks about, right? We need younger people coming in to sustain the industry and everything like that. But depending on what regulation you're facing, what demographic, what they're exposed to, is either limiting or advancing the ability to introduce cashless. So, John, in Australia, there's obviously lots of challenge. You're neck deep in it. It's heavily political at the moment, regulatory driven, lots of spotlights, sort of the industry, particularly the casinos, without pointing anyone out, they've sort of probably brought it on the industry a little bit, and now it's completely put a spotlight on Australia. So, what are you seeing there? And give us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's been a change in discussion. So we've been trying to get new cashless technologies through many different regulators in Australia for the last 5 years, and we've found resistance because of perceived harm minimisation risks and things like that. Now that we've had multiple inquiries in Australia that have uncovered negligence around AML best practice, the governments are seeing a move to cashless as a way to tighten up those controls. So now we're actually getting support from the many and varied regulators around the country, and we're seeing more resistance from operators. So we flipped the dynamic, we flipped the paradigm completely. So previously we had our operators coming to us saying, we've got an ageing demographic, how are we going to secure this bottom end of the player, like of the age market? Like Chris was saying, we've got younger players who just don't transact with cash anymore. IGT has held customer forums in Australia over the last month where we've polled the audience on their preferred payment method for standard purchases, coffee, groceries, etc. And those who chose cash were fewer than 10%. And if you look at the Australian Reserve Bank data for payments, the two major downward trending payment types are cash and cheques, obviously cheques. And the ones on the way up are debit cards and new payment platforms. So people are adopting, accelerated particularly with COVID. People are adopting those technologies, and right now, gaming's not catering for that spend type. So like I said, we were pursuing that on behalf of our customers, the operators, and now, because it's being forced on them, they're sort of saying, well, what's it come with?
Yeah, well, I think the pandemic's obviously affected everyone in many different ways, and I think a lot of regulators, particularly in Australia, are taking advantage of that, right? They've seen that, I think before the pandemic, there's not many, QR coding, for instance, right? You'd have a lot of older people wouldn't know what a QR code is. Now they're professional QR coders, right? So they've probably got QR codes at home. So I think that's allowed certain governments and regulators to have a look at it and say, wow, well, this is maybe our horse to jump on. And maybe it's given, politically them the courage to sort of take on something like that. There's a lot of, particularly in Australia, it's quite political. There's the club industry is, I believe, one of the best industries in the world. But, politically, it's always been difficult to get things across because there's a lot of voting power and what have you. They just seem to be taking advantage of the situation. But does that open up opportunities as well? So we get the cashless through, and at the moment it's pretty scary because it's regulatory driven, and there's a lot of inquiries, and it's sort of doom and gloom. But once that's through and it settles down, and you have a major market with a lot of machines and that on cashless, does that open up an opportunity like the panel before about innovation? Does that then lay the foundation for suppliers to have different conversations with regulators and say, well, now that we have a cashless system in, are we able to apply these types of games on a mobile device in a licensed premise or what have you to open up, maybe attracting more people into that venue? I mean, there's potential opportunities in going cashless more so than the regulatory doom and gloom. Would you agree with that?
Definitely. I think interestingly, that whole definition of cashless has been a key talking point with every regulator that I've spoken to, because we operate so much of our gaming cashlessly already. Premium players in Asia typically telegraphic transfer funds into a holding account, get issued a CPV or an account to play electronic games, and never a note was to be seen. It's already cashless gaming. So defining what that is, I mean, everyone immediately goes to a digital wallet. That's not necessarily the solution. It's open for innovation, it's open for competition, and as someone who provides technology, it's a very exciting time.
So Paul, from a compliance point of view, do you see compliance keeping up with the opportunities?
Yeah, actually, I see compliance as driving. If we look at the regulation that's coming down, which is primarily from an anti-money laundering point of view, and cashless is probably the easiest answer. And actually, that's a more mature way of looking at it, because most countries have actually gone the opposite and said, well, we'll beef up the regulations and we'll increase processes. Well, the easy way just to solve it is cashless. The problem is that cashless is still new. So how we implement it, how we build it, how we develop it is the key here, because that's going to be the success or failure. And the success or failure is whether people will use it. Whether they're forced to or not, they've got to use it, so it's got to be user-friendly. Then you put the compliance aspect on the top, and all of a sudden you have a whole new world. Because every casino, I think, in the world wants sustainable players. They want players who will come in on a regular basis, spend money they can afford to lose, and then go home happy at the end of the day whether they've won or lost. And one of the beauty of regulation now is if we start putting over the compliance requirements of responsible gaming and safer gambling policy, then what you're going to have is a more sustainable player, because you can actually stop a player playing with an app very quickly because you just turn it off. So if they hit a period of sustained play, more than 3 hours as it's going to be in Australia, then you'll be able to stop the app and actually send them a gift token to go to the coffee shop. So I think definitely regulation is going to play a huge part in this to create it. But then if we actually start innovating well, then we naturally put regulation into the cashless society. And all of a sudden you've got a sustainable player base, which is kind of where everybody wants to be.
Okay, so if we talk about technology now and then compliance, and let's say we bring in, so Nick, you've got a lot of experience in this. I've done a little bit in blockchain payment gateways and things like NFTs, and everyone talks about this. So does that blur the lines, this new type of technology? We know it's coming, some shape or form. A lot of people hear about it. I don't know if a lot of people truly understand it, but does it become blurry when they start talking about this stuff, and then you got to add the compliance layer? We're already doing stuff in cashless.
Well, it doesn't really become blurry. It becomes quite exciting because, as we've all said in the earlier panel, it's about innovation. And what we're doing is we're innovating with technology that's engaging with the existing player base and also encouraging the new players to come through. Because, as you rightly said, Chris, there's a demographic of people that virtually never ever use cash, and how are we going to attract them into our physical casinos if they've got to transact in cash, in typical fiat currency? So by encouraging people to utilize or download and activate a wallet on their mobile device, and they can seamlessly transact from traditional currency, the Australian dollar, into a stable token that's residing within that wallet or that casino currency. They can transact throughout the casino. It can be linked into loyalty programs. It can be linked into the food and beverage. It can be linked into everything. So it also then provides this omni-channel solution, because it's online, offline. It's all the same wallet. It's all the same casino currency that you're transacting within the casino, that closed loop casino environment, whether it be Crown or Star or Venetian or whoever it may be.
Yep.
But the beauty is, once you've got that information, you can start to put in player behavioural monitoring. You can start to put in on these AML tracks, source of funds, affordability checks, and all this compliance stuff, which is what's driving cashless, or this governance that's coming down. And it just gives a much better feeling for the player, because they have more interaction with the operator, whether it be online, whether it be offline, and they're being encouraged to play responsibly.
Sure. Well, I think there's no doubt that obviously technology is crossing over a lot of different sections, right? So we're going to be blending compliance with technology, and it's going to depend on the different markets and then how you address the different players in their market. So the question was, are you cashless? You're probably doing it wrong. I don't know if there is a right way or a wrong way to do it, like after listening to you guys. So, I mean, for me, I don't think that would be my answer to that. You're probably doing it the best you can, and there's more to come. Would you, Tracy, would you agree with that?
Yes, I'd like to just weigh in on that.
Okay.
Actually, the title was a little awkward, but the idea is there, and that is, can this cashless technology be improved? And I think it can. I think we're going to see some consolidation, certainly, in cashless. But if you think about it, you have an app on your phone for Uber or Lyft. If you had to have a different app for every state that you went to, every gaming location that you went to, would you really engage with the technology in the same way? Well, right now, the way that cashless is being implemented, and depending on jurisdiction, that's pretty much the case. What you want is an easy way to access the technology that's not a barrier to the player, because the last thing that we want to do is send our players away, right? We want to engage with the player and bring them in. So I think that the technology has an opportunity to improve. I think that we're going to see some consolidation with it, and I think it will continue to be a crossover, at least from a U.S. perspective. And I won't speak for any other jurisdictions, but from a U.S. perspective, I definitely see it being both Tito and cashless for some time to come.
I think that player choice is very important, Tracy, and I think we're unfortunately leaning, like I said, toward that digital wallet definition of cashless. So everyone's assuming we're getting an app. That's not the only way we can deliver this type of solution as well. We've seen for many, many years people trying to improve the way RFID chips are used within casinos and assigning them to players and things like that. So the player protection things that we were talking about previously, we don't need an app and an account to be able to disable people to gaming. We can do that via the chips that they're using. For electronic gaming, sure, we need an account, but again, that doesn't have to be app-driven. We currently access gaming accounts via a magnetic stripe card in gaming machines. That can continue, again, back to player choice. I've been coming here for 20 years, I've been using my card, let me keep doing it. We can do that cashlessly. It's just how we're funding the initial gaming session is without cash. Definition of cashless is no cash.
So that starts with the regulators then, really, right? Like, so if regulation allows cashless applications to come in, it's like in whatever form, that starts it. But then if you think about, say, the next 5 years or next 10 years of technology development and application to the world in general, how we're going to use the internet, how we're going to interact with our phone, the speed of which over the next 5 to 10 years is going to be warp speed compared to previous. So as an industry, whether it's regulatory, compliance, operator or supplier, are we going to be able to keep up with it?
No.
That's a big question. I think we will endeavour to keep up with it. The regulators certainly won't keep up with it. But I think the technology companies, we're moving at such a fast rate of knots. We're moving forward so quickly that the technology is changing almost on a monthly, annual basis. And there's always something new, but we do have to put a stake in the ground and move to that stake. And as you're seeing sort of from your homeland down in Australia, there's a massive drive on player protection and governance. And so this is when you start to use the technologies that are available today, you can start to protect the player a lot more, because using behavioural monitoring, you can notice how long they've been sitting at a machine, how long, so they can go and get their digital drinks voucher to go and walk away from the machine to take that play break. And this is becoming very important with this sustainable gameplay and moving forward. And to go back to the sort of the US example, yes, we can operate in multiple states, because if you've got a casino in Nevada and a casino in Atlantic City and they're part of the same closed loops solution, that one wallet or app will work in those properties because they're linked properties. But you're not cross-border any cash.
It's cross-commercial entities. Someone's got to own the treasury, right?
Yeah.
That's the real tricky bit there. In answer to your question, though, Chris, are we going to keep up? I think it's going to be dependent on a nexus event like what we're seeing in Australia. So we've had multiple inquiries, and all of a sudden, the proverbials hit the fan, and we need controls around AML that can only be delivered through moving to cashless. So like I said at the start, the thing I've been trying to get approved in the market for 5 years, all of a sudden now has some impetus and now has some drive. So all of this innovation, gaming's been, the question was asked at the last panel, how do we innovate? How are we bringing innovation to market? It's really slowed by regulation. And we need that sort of event to tip us over the next technological edge.
Yeah, so if we bring this back to Asia, right? So for me, I think the Philippines is a market. We're sitting in it right now, is probably one of the most advanced markets that are looking at payment gateways and different technologies. They really are leading the way for our industry, I believe, in this region by a mile. Mm-hmm. Like, some are looking at it, others aren't, but the Philippines certainly are. PADCOR is open to it, the government's open to it. So it's exciting times, and I think that, like you said, John, I think you also need one in a market to really sort of take the challenge, go work through with operators, suppliers, technology companies, figure it out, make a ton of mistakes, doing it wrong, if you like, to figure out how to do it right. And then there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of advantages for other regions, or other countries within the region to have a look and say, well, maybe that's maybe how something like, Nick, you're talking about, new technologies that are coming in that can sort of coexist with older technologies that may be necessary. You need someone to do it. So for me, the Philippines is definitely leading. Would you guys agree with that in Asia, if we bring it back to Asia?
Yeah, I definitely would. I think just talking to people, I'd argue the technology already exists. What doesn't exist is the piece of middleware to put it all together. And the reason we haven't done that is because nobody knows what the end result needs to actually be, because we actually have to test it to prove it. That's technology. And what we're trying to do now in the Philippines is so exciting, because those conversations are going on at the highest level. And once those conversations start at the highest level, you start having working groups, you can then have proof of concepts. And it's proof of concepts that will create the final kind of resolution of what this will look like for the Philippines. And then it's just a case of taking that into other markets and adapting it if it works. So yeah, I think Philippines, taking the lead in the discussion is excellent, because it's not necessarily being driven by regulation here. Regulation will follow very quickly, but the regulators are actually saying to the industry, give me a solution. Let's have that discussion. Let's try a proof of concept. And I think that's what has been missing in Australia and the US recently, that discussion hasn't been had. You've just gone straight for this is what the regulation is going to look like. And I think that's where it's fallen down.
Sure. Tracy, you got any comments?
No comment on that.
Nick, John, you good?
That just one point on that, the centralisation and one owner and one decision. One of the benefits IGT has in this space is that we operate in so many different vertical markets. So we have an interactive online presence. We have lotteries, we have monitoring, we have land-based gaming. And the lotteries business in Sweden through Svenska Spel, state-owned video lottery terminals throughout all of Sweden, are delivered 100% cashlessly through the Swedish cashless platform, similar to MPay in Macau. So all of the gaming is already 100% cashless. So there are models out there we can look at. It has been proven and it does work, but that's state-owned. Like I said, when we've got all of these different commercial entities, it becomes messy. We need a middleware layer and someone to own the treasury.
Yeah, so to round it out, so there's opportunities for more competitors to come into space, fintech type sort of, in this space to shake it up, and technology is probably going to run alongside that. It's going to be a lot of disruptive technology coming in the future to align with, potentially someone that just comes out of the blue in our industry and says, hey, here we are, if it aligns with regulatory. Okay, well, I think we'll take it out to any questions. Has anyone got any questions for the panel? Well, we answered all the questions. We've stunned them.
Chris, there's one thing that I did want to talk about, and that is from the operator's point of view. If I'm an operator, one of the things that they ask me a lot about with our software solution is, how do I reward and instill player loyalty in my uncarded players? And it's a big challenge that's out there for operators to reach that uncarded player. So if you think about this, unless it's a regulatory push, right, there's a significant amount of player resistance to even becoming a carded player. Yeah. So I think that we've got a big hill to climb to get over that. It's an issue that operators face, and are they really? We've got to have a better solution for them if we are to go cashless, to make that attractive to players.
Sure, well, across the board, I totally agree. The whole Big Brother stuff and certain people not wanting to be tracked. I think social media adds to that as well. Everyone's learning valuable lessons. I know if you've got kids, you're certainly learning a hell of a lot more lessons than others. So, but I mean, yeah, I agree totally. It's a challenge, and there is definitely a hill to climb. But I think it needs to be. It'll be climbed, and it'll be interesting to see who's at the top. All right. If we haven't got any questions, I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you.